Hello, welcome to the channel. In this video, I want to go over some important things to know and some tips if you want to plan a visit to Yellowstone National Park in the winter. I have a few Yellowstone in winter videos on my channel and I get a lot of questions about it, so I'm going to put it all in this video for you. Everything I've learned over the years from visiting the park in the beautiful winter months. So Yellowstone National Park in the winter is so beautiful if you want to avoid the crowds and just experience the landscape and the animals and in a whole different way. The winter is really a special time. So it's actually my favorite time to go to the park, mainly because, like I said, there's not a lot of people. Before we dive in, if you are new to my channel, consider hitting that subscribe button. I would love to see you in another video. I am here with new videos just about every single week. So without further ado, let's dive right in. All right, so the first thing that I want to talk about is road closures and what part of the park you actually can go to. So every year in early November, all of the roads in the park close except for the road from Mammoth Hot Springs to the northeast entrance at Silvergate. So that is the only road that you can drive your vehicle through the park. That is plowed. They do a pretty good job of removing snow and just keeping it maintained. But every other road in the park is closed. So if you want to see some of the iconic places in Yellowstone, such as Old Faithful, Yellowstone Lake, the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, you're going to need to book a snowmobiling guided tour or a snow coach tour in order to access those other areas of the park. Now, if you're like me and you really just want to see the wildlife and experience the beautiful winter landscape, then that drive from Mammoth Hot Springs to Silvergate, Cook City area is a beautiful drive, and it really is all you need if you want to see the animals, because you go through the Lamar Valley section of the park, which is my favorite area. There are always tons of bison there, and it's just a really great wildlife viewing area. And so if that's what you want to do in the park, then driving your vehicle through the park on that road is really beautiful, and there's plenty to see. Okay, so here is a map of Yellowstone National Park. This is just the brochure map that you'll get when you enter the park. And I want to zoom into the area that I'm talking about. So the park is obviously huge, and the area that I'm talking about is just up here. So let me zoom in. Okay, so when I visit the park in winter and I want to drive my car through the park, I start in Gardiner, Montana, which is up here. Gardiner has hotels and just lodging options, food, little gift shops. It's a cute little town. From here, you can drive into the park all the way up to this Mammoth Hot Springs area. I will zoom in on that in a second. And then this is the road that is open in the winter all the way here to Tower Junction, and then out here into Lamar Valley and all the way to the northeast entrance at Silvergate. In Cook City, there is some lodging and some food. It's a small little town, but there are some resources here. In the wintertime, the only way to get to Cook City is through the park. So it's closed off in this direction. If you live over here, if you're coming from this side, you are going to have to drive up and all the way around to Gardiner in order to drive through the park and get to Cook City. So it is a lot more isolated in the winter months. But this is the only road that is open in the winter that you can drive in with your own car. If there is some really intense, severe storm, this road can be closed. I think it's pretty rare, but it is possible. They do a really good job, I think, of plowing it and just keeping it pretty clear, but it is icy and snowy at times, so definitely be prepared for winter travel. Now, if you want to visit any of the other areas in the park, you're going to need to book a tour with a snowmobile or a snow coach. So these roads are open to over snow travel only. So I want to zoom into the Mammoth Hot Spring area, and there are some resources here. There's really not a whole lot going on in the winter months, but the hot springs are right here and they are active in the winter. I actually think they're beautiful in the winter months because the contrast of the steam with the snow just looks really cool. So you can walk along these terraces. This road is closed, but there are some snowshoeing and cross-country skiing options. So definitely talk to a ranger to see what's open and what's safe to do on the particular time that you're visiting. But this area is really beautiful. I just love walking around up here and on these boardwalks and just experiencing the snow and the hot springs.
This area in the summer is so unbelievably crowded. Like, it is nearly impossible to find parking, but in the winter, it's very easy. There's like hardly anyone there. So it's just a really nice place to explore. Along this road, there's plenty of opportunities to see animals. In the Lamar Valley section, I pretty much always see bison here. This is just one of my favorite areas of the park. It's absolutely beautiful. And then there's also some cross-country skiing and snowshoeing options as well. I've snowshoed along this Blacktail Plateau Drive. It is closed for cars in the winter, but there are some snowshoeing opportunities here. Again, just really check with a ranger because conditions can vary from year to year. So check on that before you head out. So that's really it for what you can do with your own car. Now, if you are interested in booking some sort of a tour, West Yellowstone is a great hub for snowmobiling if you want to visit Old Faithful. That's going to be your closest entry point. This is a huge snowmobiling town. There is some lodging and some restaurants, and often I see snowmobilers just driving through town. So this is a great hub. I've personally never used any of the guiding services here, so I don't have any recommendations based on experience, but this is a great area to check out if that's something that you're interested in doing.
Now, this video is primarily for those of you who do want to drive a car through the park. You're not really interested in doing any of the guided tours. So a lot of the tips and other things that we're going to talk about will be geared towards planning a trip like that. I do have a detailed blog post, which I will link to in the description, that has further information if you want to try to book snowmobiling tours or snow coach tours to experience some of the other areas of the park. So check that out in the description. In terms of the best time in the winter to visit the park, I mean, I really think that comes down to personal preference, and it also can vary so much year to year, like the conditions. So it's really hard to kind of put concrete things around certain times, but I visited in both December and February, and I enjoyed both times. February had a lot more snow, but the days were also longer, and I think I did really enjoy that. December were at the shortest that the days are, and so that does limit the time that you can kind of see things and get through the park. Whereas later in the winter, in February, the days are longer and there was more snow, and that was really beautiful. If you're into more of the snow sports like snowshoeing or cross-country skiing, that can be really great to have a little bit more snow. So it just kind of varies depending on what you want to do and honestly when you can get there. So I don't really think there is a best time in the winter to visit, but for those longer days and maybe more snow, depending on the activities that you want to do, maybe waiting a little bit later in the winter is better. Now I want to share my top tips for visiting Yellowstone in the winter. These are the things that I've just learned over the years. If you want to take your car and drive through the park, this is the stuff that I think you should know. So the first one is fairly obvious, and it is to check the weather before you actually enter the park. So there is very, very limited to no cell service in the park. And so you're gonna wanna check the weather before you head in, and check it in multiple places, because that drive from Gardner, Montana, all the way to Silvergate and Cook City area, that's a long drive. You're covering quite a bit of mileage. And so the weather could be different in Mammoth Hot Springs than it is over in the Silvergate area. And so when I check the weather, I'm gonna check the weather in multiple places to kind of cover most of that drive. So I'll try to check the weather in Gardner or Mammoth Hot Springs, in Tower Junction, and then in Cook City or Silvergate, depending on, the weather apps and stuff that you're using. I have experienced where I'm, in Lamar Valley and the weather is very different there, and then I drive towards Mammoth and it's perfectly clear blue skies, right? No snow. So like I said, it does vary, and just check on all that before you head in. So we got into Lamar Valley and we could see the mountains really well like 3 minutes ago, and now they're completely gone. I don't want to get into like whiteout conditions where you just can't see like anything in front of you. That's not really fun for driving, so we're gonna head back out. Now, all this talk about checking the weather, yes, I always check the weather. It's a great thing to do, but more often than not, I feel like the weather is not always super accurate. And so that's where my next tip comes in. Tip number 2 is to make sure that your vehicle is prepared for winter travel. So even if, the weather doesn't say it's supposed to snow, you want to make sure that your vehicle is checked out and prepared with the appropriate tires and all that stuff to drive in the winter. And to make sure that you are also comfortable driving in snowy, icy, winter conditions through the mountains. So these roads are windy, there are steep drop-offs, there are no guardrails in sections of it. And so you just want to make sure that your vehicle and you as the driver is prepared for that type of a journey. Which then leads me to tip number 3, which is to make sure that you have emergency supplies in your vehicle. This, I think, is the most overlooked thing when it comes to winter travel and winter road trips, or just road trips in general. But you want to make sure that you have the supplies and gear in your vehicle to stay out longer than you expected and to help yourself in the event of an emergency. Because like I said, there is no self-service there. The park is a lot less crowded in the winter as well. So you just have a lot less people driving around, and you just want to be able to help yourself in the event of an emergency. For example, I always have a big extra sleeping bag in my car in case I have to sit out and I need something to keep me warm. I have extra clothing, I have plenty of extra food and water, tire changing supplies, all that kind of stuff so that I can handle things if they come up. Another thing is a battery powered jumper box for your car if your battery dies. So these things are really important to be thinking about and to be preparing for prior to entering the park. Tip number 4 is to bring plenty of extra clothing layers. Pack more than you think you're going to need. Yellowstone National Park gets so cold. Typical temperatures in Yellowstone can range from 0 Fahrenheit to 20 Fahrenheit during the day, but sub-zero temperatures are very common. So it is gonna be cold. I actually read that the record low temperature in Yellowstone is negative 66 degrees Fahrenheit. What the heck, right? I cannot even imagine that. And then you add in, the wind chill and things like that, and it can feel very cold very quickly. So really bringing those extra clothing layers and thinking about dressing in moisture wicking clothing and in layers, hats, gloves, all that good stuff. You even want to consider like a face guard, a neck gaiter and stuff like that to block you from the wind. Depending on what activities you're going to be doing in the park, you're going to need gear and clothing for those activities. For example, if you want to go snowshoeing or cross-country skiing, of course, you're going to need specific things for that. But if you are just driving through the park, think about warm insulated boots as well. Fleece-lined pants are my favorite because they just add that extra layer of warmth. So just make sure you pack all of those layers in the car so that you have some options when you're in the park and you're able to adjust as the temperatures change. Tip number 5 is to bring lots of snacks and warm drinks. So there are no facilities in the park other than some little things in Mammoth Hot Springs area. Once you enter the park and start that drive through and into Lamar Valley, there are no places to buy snacks or buy water and that kind of stuff. So make sure that your car is fully stocked with all the food and snacks that you're going to want throughout the day, but then also consider bringing a thermos with some hot cocoa or some hot coffee. I also like to pack my backpacking stove so that I can make some hot coffee or some hot cocoa throughout the day. But just having a thermos of hot liquid while you're sitting out looking at animals is just so nice. And so I definitely recommend packing that. Another thing that I like to do is stop at the local grocery store in Gardner, Montana and pick up to-go sandwiches, and that just makes a really easy lunch to have on hand as you're driving through the park. Tip number 6 is don't forget binoculars or a spotting scope. If you're going to spend the time and the money to travel to Yellowstone, then I highly recommend that you at least bring a nice pair of binoculars and maybe even a tripod to set them on. The landscape in Yellowstone is so vast, and a lot of times the animals can be at quite a distance, like especially if you happen to get lucky and spot the wolves, you're going to want some binoculars to be able to look at them a lot closer. So that's just one of those things that I think a lot of people don't really think to bring if you're just passing through the park, but it will make such a difference in just allowing you to see so many more details and really just slow things down and enjoy the landscape. And then the tripod is nice if you are going to sit out and look through your binoculars for a long period of time. If you're holding them up to your face, it just gets kind of sickening very quickly. So if you have a tripod to put them on, it just makes things a lot more stable and enjoyable to look through. I will link to the tripod and the binoculars that I have in the description below. If you want to take that a step further, you can get a spotting scope, and that is something that we're hoping to get before our next trip to Yellowstone. They're a lot bigger and bulkier, but man, they are really spectacular. If you happen to spot some animals in the distance, a spotting scope is awesome. So that's our next upgrade. But at the very least, binoculars will be really nice to have. And my last tip is to watch out for animals on the roadway. So the animals in Yellowstone are wild animals. They are unpredictable. So you obviously don't want to be approaching them. But I have noticed that in the winter, especially later in the winter when there's a lot more snow built up in the park, some of the animals, specifically the bison, tend to take the roads a lot more because it's obviously easier to move through the road that is plowed than it is to move through several feet of snow. So I just noticed that the bison tend to be a lot closer to the road. And so just watch out for the animals, don't approach them. Just keep in mind that bison can run up to like 35 miles an hour. They're very agile. They are not these like big, slow moving animals, so they can't outrun you. So just do not underestimate the wild animals. And remember, they are wild animals. So you just want to be keeping a good, safe distance and not approaching them and being patient if, you know, they're crossing the road or whatever it is. So with that, those are my tips for visiting Yellowstone in the winter if you want to plan a trip there and drive through. Like I mentioned, check out a lot of the resources and links to things in the description box below the video. There's tons more info there when you're actually going to plan your trip. I hope this was helpful. If you have any other questions, please comment below. Happy to help you. Give the video a like if you liked it, and I will see you in the next video.